I was reluctant at first to accept the request to become a speaker on this topic, because it's something that I find difficult to navigate, considering considering the different undertones, of being an activist. But nonetheless, I accepted it because I know that it is important for students, especially to understand, especially Christian students, to understand where they have to position themselves in relation to activism. Now, in 1969, that was the height of activism, and disorder, in many universities in the Philippines, particularly at UP. And I remember one time, the students from UP-LB were actually mobilizing all students in Los Baños, including high school. And I was at that time first year high school, and they actually came up to our school, which was literally very high. It's high school, it's in the hill, but they came up there and they actually practically pull us out of our classroom, to join them in the mass action here in Junction, where so many students actually lined up the streets, from Calamba to San Pablo, and then from Mayundon to UPLB, and that there was really a big crowd and everybody was shouting. And so, when we got there, we started shouting as well. But remember, I was just 13 years old at that time, together with a few other first-year high school students, and we were shouting, and we were very, oblivious of the hazards, of the dangers that actually were there, given the very unstable, peace and order situation, in a mass action like that. And they started burning tires, and so on. And when there were blasts from Molotovs, the Molotov bomb, we started to scamper, and we tried to find our way back to our school, and we did so, by walking, and it was a long walk. It was about 1.5 kilometers, but that was a long walk for us. So nonetheless, in the following Monday, we found ourselves in the office of the principal, and the principal, was asking us, why did you join? Why were you there? Do you know what you are doing? And nobody of us can say anything, and I can't say anything because I know that I don't know why I was there, but I was just there because everybody else seemed to be, going there. So I just went along with the crowd, and that was an experience to me. And I hope that this short discussion that we will have this evening will provide some guideposts, on how we can and how we should be activists, as a Christian, because I do believe that there is right and that there is strong activism when a Christian participates in those kinds of actions. So that's my objective for this evening, and hopefully we'll get something out of this that can help you in okay, sorry. Okay, so my topic is on activism, and can a Christian be an activist? And I think that's that's a question that we will always ask ourselves, for being Christians in the university, especially at UPLB, where we know that activism is quite a common is quite a common event, that you see in the campus. So let me begin by defining a few terms. One is, what is an activist? An activist is someone who is active in campaigning for change, normally on political or social issues. So it's someone who is campaigning or advocating for change, in political and social systems, most of the time. And then activism refers to the campaign strategies and activists use. So activism refers to the method, and the method can be many different methods, as we will see later, but when we talk of activism, what comes to mind always, or readily, is the seeing, mass of students, marching on the streets, and that's usually what easily comes into our mind. But there are actually a lot of methods by which we can use, okay, to pursue the change that we want to see. Okay, so so there is another, there's another term that I'd like to define side by side with activism, compare the two of them, because there are many times that we interchange these terms, and there are a lot of similarities actually. When we talk about activism, this is taking action to effect social change, and there could be different ways and different forms, and they're usually, and this is usually concerned with how to change the world through social, political, economic, or environmental change. And this can be done by an individual. But often, activism is conducted by a group of like-minded individuals, and that's where the social movements actually took its name, with people actually joining together for a common cause. And then they often, activism often opposes or pressures those who carry out injustice, violation of human rights, corruption. So sila yung usually trying to oppose or expose. And then usually, according to the article that I read on this, the change actually, when the change that we actually see as a result of activism or mass action usually lasts only until the pressure is on. When the pressure is off already, things sort of goes back to where it was before. And I think we can see that, during the People Power Revolution, at that time there was a lot of pressure, from the people for the government to change, and we see that for a number of years, going on. But then slowly, we see all this corruption, still in injustices, and then human rights violation, started to be how they were before the People Power Revolution. And of course, the main object of that one was actually to unseat the former President Ferdinand Marcos. But basically, they want a change in the government, to be a government free from corruption, but upholding justice and human rights. And then advocacy, on the other hand, is a campaign strategy consisting of a set of actions. So merong set of actions yan, and usually well thought out, structured yan, and designed to create support for a policy or proposal with the aim in view of effecting social, political, and environmental change. It's meant to effect change in habits, behaviors, and this could be employed in activism itself. In fact, many activism actually use advocacy, combined advocacy, after they see many of their previous methods, failing to achieve their goal. And then its advocacy supports alternative policy or program to those that is or are currently in place. And the change here is often lasting, because the change, the change that being sought after here involves change in habits and behaviors, even paradigms, even way of thinking. So the change achieved through advocacy, tend to last longer than those achieved through activism. And there are, when we look at activism, there are two major groups, okay, of methods, or two major types rather, and there's what we call individual, and there is a collective activism. So as we said before, individual is more carried out on a personal basis, whereas collective is undertaken by two or more individuals. And usually individual activism, is a personal cause, wherein collective activism has, is working for a common cause. And usually they develop common identity, like for instance, labor groups, who are advocating for changes or reform in the labor laws and policies, and their common identity is that they are labor force, usually those that are, in the what do you call that? Mga ano sila, mga ordinary workers, things like those that you can find most of the time joining this activism. And then whether it's individual or collective, their activism can be classified, by the methods that they use. And the one group is conventional, and the other one is radical. Now, the conventional, these are the methods that usually follow rules and norms for civic engagement. So within the bounds of the law, they work within the institution and its rules, okay, for civic engagement. So they follow, what the law is saying, how much they could, what kind of activities they can and they cannot do, and where they can and they cannot do. And then it's also mostly, using persuasive methods, not persuasion. Okay, they persuade people. They persuade the reasoning of the people, and then non-disruptive. They don't disrupt, the normal flow of activities of society, and then they are. These are non-violent methods. The radical methods, on the other hand, they violate rules and norms for civic engagement. They usually use coercion. They put pressure, and some activism even go to the extent of blackmailing. And this is very disruptive. They disrupt the flow of society's activities, like transport, and then they usually tend to become violent, and out of control. So these are the two groups that are usually, that are usually used for individual or collective activism. And then to give us an example, what the conventional methods are, this includes vigils persuasive advocacy, rational argument, speeches, petitions, lobbying, education, or in our common term now, IEC, information, education, and communication programs. And then examples of radical methods include protests, boycotts, civil disobedience, occupation, that's illegal occupation. So taking over of government or private property, so that's illegal occupation. If you remember, for instance, the ano bang tawag doon sa mga rebelde na yun, sila those military rebels who occupied Manila Peninsula, at that time. And of course, we know that Trillanes, was part of the group that actually took over Manila Peninsula as one of their base of activities. And then blockades, blockading the roads, okay, preventing people from traveling, just like what they usually do, in the 1960s and 70s, where they go on the streets, and they block it with human barriers or with burning tires, and so on. So, and then riots, okay. Usually they don't start with riots, but then, when the crowd starts to get rowdy, then riots will break out of it. And then sabotage, they tend to burn things, burn properties, the stone buildings and so on, stone cars, etc. So that's these are examples of radical methods of activism. Bill Moyer, was one of the, I think he was a social psychologist, actually defined four types of roles, roles in activism that an individual can actually play or assume, and according to him, there are citizens who are responsible, okay, respected and accepted of the majority, accepted of the majority of ordinary citizens, need to say yes to those fundamental principles, values, symbols of good society that are also accepted by general public. So basically, these are basically good citizens, going on a campaign, like you can probably say these are model citizens. Now, on the other hand, we have rebels, who don't say yes, but they usually say no, and they protest social conditions, institutional policies and practices that violate core societal values and principles, but they are not anti-authority and institutions, and here Bill Moyer is actually, telling us that, you can be a rebel, but you can be a rebel without, without being anti-authority and institution, which is by human nature, very difficult to actually do, especially the culture of rebels that we have known, So tayo kasi pag sinabing rebelde, anti-government. And then they do not use violent tactics. So again, this is something that is, kumbaga, that is against what we are used to know of rebels, employing violent tactics, and they're not egocentric, but for common good. And then the third role is being change agents to educate people, on certain issues, so that they know exactly what's going on, or they are the ones who are organizing people to certain events or activities. Okay, they involve the general public to actively oppose present policies and seek positive, constructive constructive reforms. And then the reformers, these are those who work with official political and judicial structures to incorporate solutions into new laws, new policies, practices, and private institutions, and then must work to get them accepted as a conventional wisdom of mainstream society. Now, these are for those who are actually, in a position with the opportunity to actually, work with the political systems. People who are, for instance, who are, who belong to pressure groups, for instance, pressure groups who can exert pressures on policymakers, on lawmakers. This could be a private, this could be private sectors, private business industries. Okay, but most of them, when they try to influence and lobby for change in policies, it's usually for something that will be of their advantage. But the reformers being described here, reformers who work, for what is really, for the good of society. Okay, and this could be, this could include, for instance, what a university can be doing, to advocate change, for instance, in the way, in the way we manage natural resources, and so on, because they know what's the best practice, okay, to what's the best practice to manage natural resources, and they usually conduct, or in a proper venue, they present their positions, and their policy recommendations. So some examples of activists, and activism, Gandhi, he led the non-violent resistance against British Empire so that India can become an independent nation. And then Helen Keller, an activist who raised consciousness on disabled individuals, So she was herself a disabled woman, and he spent most of his life advocating for rights of disabled individuals. Martin Luther King, is an activist who led campaign for equal rights for African Americans. So many of you know him. And then Greta Thunberg, he's a young environmental activist campaigning for world leaders to take action to mitigate climate change. So she became popular, when she spoke, somewhere in one of the COPs. So she's a young environmental activist. And then Greenpeace, Greenpeace is a network of independent organizations using peaceful, creative confrontation to expose global environmental problems and develop solutions for green and peaceful future. The goal is to ensure the ability of the earth to nurture in all its diversity. Although I have a personal experience with Greenpeace, they actually, they usually illegally occupy, public properties, government properties, or they also destroy actually government facilities. I have first-hand experience in this, in one of the study sites, experimental areas of UPLB. So I know for a fact that they are not really true to what they are advocating for, peaceful change. So, but something that that's really difficult to control. And then we have recently the Black Lives Matter. We know that they are campaigning for economic and racial justice, for equal rights and opportunities for people of color, for quality education. Okay, so they call although they usually work for the rights of African Americans as well. No? So they seek changes in policies, and practices that perpetuates structural racism. And we have the EDSA People, EDSA People Revolution. EDSA People Revolution was, I think we're all familiar with this, even those who were never born yet, no? Especially our students joining us here. We know that many of them, or all of them practically, were not yet born during this time. And we know what happened here. People took to the streets and didn't stop until the president, then President Ferdinand Marcos, was unseated, and forced to leave Malacanang, and went to Hawaii, where he stayed for a long, long time until he died. Now, EDSA People Power Revolution, we know, was a form of activism, but it was not, it was not really connected to any, should we say, the systematic, a systematic campaign. It was sort of just was sparked actually by the outrageous manipulation of the election at that time, and at the same time also, because of the violation of human rights that was actually, very pervasive at that time. That includes the assassination of former Senator Ninoy Aquino, with sort of the sentiments of the people, building up until they vented it out, in the People Power, revolution. Okay, so what's required of every Christian? What's required of us? In other words, what are our duties as Christian? What are our duties, in this world? Christ calls us to be the salt and light of the earth. That's in Matthew chapter 5. And we know that as Christians, we are not to disengage in this world. We have roles to play. Okay, and according to Matthew 5, we should have seasoning, preserving, and illuminating influence in this dark and perverse generation. So we can bring distinct flavor of God's values to all life, and preserve what is good. We have a duty to help diminish participation in sin, and then expose the existence of sin, by proclaiming Christ as Lord and Savior, by our works, or by works and by words. So our lives should attract attention to our Lord and His gospel, and point people to rely on the Lord, instead of relying on man and government, and that's basically what or how we should live our lives. That it must be a reflection of who God is, that they may be drawn to our Lord, and submit to His lordship. We also know that that this world is will come to its end, and that's inevitable. But we should continue. But it doesn't mean that we should stop working, and stop to be concerned about the world that we live in right now, because we know that it's it's ending and it's going to be renewed, when Christ returns. But again, does that mean that we can, or we should, we should stop? Okay, we should stop working, for the good of this world, but we have the duty to continue to work, for to work, but in a way that is different on how, how this world operates. We work differently. We work differently. Our work ethics are different. Our our values are different. Our preferences are different. And with those, we try to influence others also to do the same. And then we also, we also have the duty to pray for the improvement of our societies and those who lead them. And we see in 1 Timothy 2, 1-4, this urging, of God's people to actually pray, and intercede for people, for kings, for heads of nations, so that we can have a peaceful, quiet life, prosperous life, in a godly and dignified in every way. And this is something that that we are asked to do, And of course, we know that this world is not our home, but still we should pray for its improvement and for our leaders. It's because we know that this is part of our stewardship responsibility. And then third is that we should be agents of change, okay, by being zealous for good works, in Titus 2:14. If we want to influence people to do good works, then they must see exactly the good works being done by us. We cannot ask people to be good if they don't see us to be good. The best way to actually undermine our cause, our cause for reform is, or cause for change is, for people to see that we ourselves are not changing, the way we want to see changes, and I think it was Gandhi who said that, we should, how did he say that? Be yourself the change that you want to see in the world, So the only, one of the best way to really push for, for your agenda of bringing change, is for them to see that you are also living out, the change that you want to see in the world, And then we are also reminded to be submissive to rulers, authorities, to be obedient, be ready for every good work, to speak evil of no one, avoid quarreling. So that's what we see in Titus 3:1-2, and somehow in Romans 13:1-4. So we have to submit to our rulers and authorities, because they are actually appointed by God to actually exercise and to execute justice, okay, maintain justice in our places, in our countries, and where we are, okay. And then in diverse way, therefore, we see that Christians are an activist, or Christian is basically an activist, or Christian should be an activist, just so, because we are to be agent of change, that although that change may not necessarily be directly, striving for change in social and political systems, but we rely on the change, inward change that should take place in every individual, out of which changes in the society can actually come about. And we are to actively participate in making this world better for everyone, in building peaceful and just society. Individual Christians should be active as opportunity arises in social service and social action. Now, I actually took some of this from the lecture of Pastor Noel on Christianity and Nation. And then social service, no, responds to needs such as the needs of street children, and then we at KSN, our church, we respond to the need of victims of natural calamities, and these are all part of the social service. We call it benevolence in our church, but this falls under social service, because we respond to needs of needy individuals. And then social action seeks reforms in political system, reforming the systems to stop corruption, injustice, human rights violation, and many other abuses, of people who are in authority. So let me now provide some guidelines for Christian activism, before we end this for discussion. First, we are Christ ambassadors for life. Our lifelong goal is to seek the ultimate good of others through the life-changing, saving grace of Christ. So we, that is our goal. Our goal is to see to it that all individuals are actually touched by the saving grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, and we should seek to reconcile people to God before they can be reconciled to one another. Again, we want the change to begin, from the person inwardly, and then outwardly. I mean, and then from which changes in his relations with other people, will can actually be can actually happen, And then the gospel reforms. We know that the gospel reforms the character, transforming bad habits into virtues that are opposed to poverty, injustice, corruption, and other social problems. So again, the change in an individual, changing his character, okay, transforming it into virtues with that are opposed to poverty, injustice, and other social problems. And then we practically, work with church. Okay, of course, we can work with other institutions. We can work with other organizations, but we have to be very careful that we choose, who to work with outside of the church, because we can easily be tagged, with whatever Christian label that are that the organizations, and organizations and institutions that we are working with, are known for. So we can actually work with them, but again, care should be taken in that sense. And then second, Christians should be active in promoting just and peaceful society, as opportunity arises. We need to be careful. We need to be careful in doing this. Again, it's not. There will be times that we will be engaged, in promoting a just and peaceful society. I mean, joining active campaigns, that are not necessarily part of our ministry works, and so in this kind of a situation where we are engaged in this kind of activism, we need to be careful that we don't lose our identity as Christians, to the reform that we seek. Careful not to be so occupied, with the reforms that we want to achieve, that our Christian identity is lost in the process. And then the gospel message of our life should not be blurred, no, by the reform we advocate. No, we can tend to actually make people, put their hope, instead of God on the government, and our message, could mislead, people actually, without intending it, by focusing too much on the reform that we advocate. The people are not fixated on reforming, be careful that the people are not fixated on reforming the character of government as their hope for better life, instead of hope on the benevolent God. So and an activism, can be so effective, in making people, believe, that their hope for better life is if the government can actually be changed, and we should not also, we should also, let the people realize that they also need to change in the process. For instance, the informal settlers, will always crave, will always demand for the government, to provide them the basic services that they need. For instance, they want to have, houses. Okay, they want to have houses, but then they don't want responsibilities that go with it. They want everything free, and so on and so forth. And that's something that is that perpetuates, the problems that they're trying to change. Because we know, for instance, that these informal settlers, when given free housing, many of them will tend to sell them, and then go back to where they used to be. So it should be, a pursuit of change in the government, but also a change in the people, should go hand in hand. And then 3, persuasive methods in seeking social reform should be exhausted, before active radical methods. Because we know in Proverbs 25 says that with patience, a ruler may be persuaded, and a soft tongue will break a bone. And this is where, again, the conventional methods, advocacy, vigils, speeches, petitions, lobbying, rational agreement, IEC, constructive debates, dialogues, will be or should be our first recourse. Okay. And usually this is the first recourse, and if you do it really correctly and properly, will be our last, we don't need any other methods than this. Okay. And remember, many of the activist groups, who use, radical methods, usually found themselves not being able to achieve what they want to achieve, and then they end up trying to take on more conventional methods such as advocacy, and dialogues. They start to engage, the government in dialogues, and so on. So it's because these methods are more effective, in convincing people to the change, that we want to see. Okay, and at the same time also, because these methods, usually require change in habits, then the change that we see, lasts longer than what can be achieved through more radical methods. And then Christians may participate in more active methods to promote social reforms, but then we have to be, we have to observe also that only active methods that are, that does not violate God's commands, does not violate civil laws and institutions, does not violate rights of others, non-violent, non-disruptive, non-coercive. We know that Christ, rejects violence. Okay, when he rebuked James and John when they proposed to tell the fire to consume the Samaritan village that rejected them. So he is not, Christ did not use violence, to actually impose on the demands of the gospel on the Samaritans, and then Samaritan village, and then it should be non-retributive. A lot. I mean, some of the active methods actually are driven by people, who have something to avenge for, and we should be discerning that this is not the kind of activism that we want to participate in. Kung merong ganong klaseng motivation yung mga organizers of these types of activities. And then signs of unwise activism. This is my last slide. We may call this pitfalls, for Christians. One is I spend more time signing petitions than I do praying. So it's something that we have to ask ourselves, if our activism is right or is reasonable or not, or wise or not. And then I only criticize one side of the political spectrum. So something is wrong when we always see, when always see is the bad side, bad side of a political system, and not see, the good side of it, that can be encouraged or that can be supported. And then people have the impression that belonging to my church means aligning with a certain political party. So again, we are not to make that impression, create that impression. Okay, that as a church we are, that the church is siding with a certain political party, because that is not part of the mandate of the church. Not to be engaging, actively in political process, but not withdrawing from it, but engaging in a proper way. I'm more passionate about politics than I am about my local church and their mission. So again, you can be very passionate about your political engagement, but when it comes to doing your duties, Christian duties, especially with your church, medyo malamig. So that is something to question. And then lastly, I'm putting my hope for society in political elections or leaders or platforms rather than in the gospel of Christ. So our hope for change is still anchored on the gospel of Christ. Okay, that's where we put our hope, for the improvement of our society. So the best way to change this world is through Christ. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. So again, the change that will really last is a change that the gospel will affect in the life of a sinner, and hopefully, this is something that will help us, especially our students, to be discerning in their engagement in activism. Okay, there is nothing that prevents us, but there are some guidelines and caution for doing so. So yun lang, and thank you for listening. Back to you, Ian.
Thank you very much for your talk, Tito Rex. So we'll now move on to our Q&A portion. But before that, we just have to announce a few reminders first. Please keep your questions short and to the point so that we can have more time, as many questions as possible. But since we are ending now, we have 2 questions for Tito Rex now. So if for those who would like to ask live questions, please use the Zoom's raise hand function to be acknowledged by me, your moderator, or send them through the Zoom chat or privately to our RCM Zoom host, Brother Jonathan, or to Sister Eliza. And for those joining via FB Live, if you want to ask questions, you can send them in the comment section or by sending a private message to the RCM FB page. Your questions will be forwarded to the speaker as time permits. So now, moving on to our first question, Deacon Rex. Is it right or justifiable to skip our classes in a student's perspective, just so we can attend protests on social issues around us?
Personally, I don't think it's justified. I don't think it's justified to skip classes to join protests, on certain issues. It's like trying to correct something, but using the wrong methods. Okay, it's like correcting a wrong with a wrong. So it's wrong. That's my personal. I never excuse any of my students to join protests. Skip classes, because it is not right.
Right. Yeah. Even if a Christian student should be an activist, we should be reminded by what you've said a while ago, that we should need to keep our testimony as well. So now to our last question here. How can we make the gospel message more attractive to the activists' message, like social justice, human rights, helping the poor, justice for the unprivileged, and the like?
I'm not sure, we can make it any attractive as it is already as effective, without us doing anything to attract people to it. I think that we just have to, we just have to be very clear in explaining to them what the gospel is all about, and let the word of God, work its way through the hearts of people. So I don't think we can we can garnish yung gospel message, without distorting it. But siguro another important thing siguro is that the gospel must be must have an imprint on our life, on our lifestyle, on our thinking, on our habits, and that should also be a good way, to point people to Christ, if they see the gospel in the lives that we live.
Uh, I just remember what you've said a while ago, that we should also be objective and be persuasive, especially when we are about to enforce our principles of gospel to other people. So we have another question here po pala for you. Can you name some boundaries of activism that are applicable to Christians?
Boundaries. Yeah, we mentioned, a lot of the limits, to activism that we can participate in. Like it should not. First of all, it should not violate any laws of God. Okay, and then second, it should not violate any law, any civil law, or law of the land. Okay, it should not violate any human rights. Okay, because for instance, is it right? Is it right to prevent students who don't want to join the protest, from attending his or her class? And that's a common ploy, of activists in the university, and it's wrong. It's violating the right of the student, to choose to not to skip classes, so should not violate human rights. Should be non-violent, should be non-violent and non-coercive, so yun yung mga boundaries natin, no?
So even in that sense, Christians should really have a sense of discipline as well, and choose which are the topics of activism that we should propose. So moving on now to our last question. What are your thoughts on Christians who choose not to advocate for good change because they believe man is too worldly?
Can you say that again?
I'll repeat the question.
Sige nga.
What are your thoughts on Christians who choose not to advocate for good change because they believe man is too worldly or man is too sinful?
Well, it's wrong. Let me just it's wrong because again, it's trying to disengage ourselves in the world. We know that the world is not perfect. We know that the world is world full of sins, and but still, we are commanded to be active in seeking to improve, to improve this world, in whatever ways we can. If we can influence change change to better policies, change to better programs of the government, or change better habits or lifestyle of people. I think we should do that. That's part of our duty. So it's wrong to be very indifferent, to this world, just so because we know that there are, many people are worldly, So yeah, I think the more we should be interested, because if we seek the real change that we want to see in these people, it's really by way of sharing the gospel with them. Yeah.
I think that's it. We have no more questions, so no live questions as well forwarded. So thank you again very much, Tito Rex, for answering the questions and for your talk. And may this session also remind us that we shouldn't be neutral in our stand as Christians. We are called upon here in this world to make an impact, whether it can be small. And one of things is we should also communicate the good changes which we see in this worldly setup that we have now. And Just a verse to remind us in Proverbs 31, verses 8 to 9. Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and needy. So just we have a few more announcement before we